10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 29. Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. My name is Nick Manella, and I am your host. Our goal on this show is to give you a short and concise jazz lesson every single week and hopefully show you something that you hadn't previously thought of before and improve your playing in some way. So before we get started with today's episode, I just want to mention a couple of housekeeping things. We really appreciate it if you could go on iTunes and leave us a rating and review. That really helps get the podcast out to more and more people that can be helped by these jazz lessons. We also want to encourage you to visit the store on our website. There's lots of great ways to donate to the podcast and get some awesome things in return. We have transcription packs. We have our core exercises for the Improviser ebook, and also specifically for saxophone players. As many of you know, I am a saxophone player. I've just finished my first saxophone method book. It's called Comprehensive Saxophone Warm-Ups, and the book has been doing really well. I've been getting a lot of good feedback from it. So if you're looking to expand your warm-up routine and you're a saxophone player, you can go and pick up that book in the store as well. We really rely on your support to keep the podcast going, so we really appreciate everything that you can afford to buy every month. Goes straight into churning out a really good product for you. Okay, so let's jump into today's episode. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different. It's not on any specific one topic as it relates to playing, but it's more of a meta episode that I think is really going to help you guys. I've been really thinking about this a lot lately because I felt like I haven't been getting enough out of my practice time or as much as I would like to in the short time every day I have to practice. So I've been experimenting with a few things in my routine, and what I've realized is I have a tendency to try to do too much every day. And what happens is I end up really only scratching the surface on maybe 10 different concepts. And guess what? Those concepts never really come out in my playing. And up until now, I guess I haven't really realized why they haven't been coming out. And the reason is I'm trying to do too much every day, where I should be narrowing my focus to a couple of concepts every single day and getting really, really deep into those concepts. So let's start by realizing that as musicians, there's some things that we need to do on our respective instruments every single day to keep up the physical act of playing whatever instrument that we play. So I call these the core concepts of your instrument. All right, and this is something that everybody needs to work on regardless of whatever you're doing in jazz. Any concepts that you're trying to work on to get better at improvising, you need to take care of the instrument part of it first, because you can't really accomplish anything when you're improvising if you are not playing your instrument well. So a couple of these things that everybody should be working on regardless of their instrument. Number one would be sound production. This one is really obvious, but it tends not to be the most exciting thing that we work on. Make sure you're working on your sound each and every day, because after all, that's the first thing that everybody hears before they hear any of your ideas is your sound. So make sure that you've got your sound together on your instrument. That is number one. Number two would be warming up / technical exercises on your instrument. Again, this all goes back to being a competent player, and then once you are competent on your instrument, you can start getting all of your amazing improvisation ideas out. But if you can't physically pull them off, you're not going to be able to do any of that other stuff that you're studying. So make sure that you're warming up properly and you are doing some kind of technical exercises on your instrument, whether it be etudes, scales, arpeggios, you know, all that kind of stuff. I'm sure that anybody listening to this has worked on those things before. Make sure you're doing that every day. Number three is not really instrument specific, but is more basic musicianship centered, and that's ear training. You can do ear training on your instrument. In fact, I highly suggest that, but make sure that you are doing some kind of ear training every single day. We need to have good ears in order to be good jazz musicians, and you can't avoid or skip that ear training part of your practice routine, or else you're going to basically become a robot that's playing things that don't match up with what you're hearing. And this is just one of the things that is the most common between all of the greatest musicians in the world is they have amazing ears. So make sure that you're hitting on that. I'm going to do a couple of ear training episodes in the future, but make sure that you're doing some kind of ear training, whether it be intervals, identifying chord progressions, whatever level you're at, just make sure that you're hitting some of that every day, and you really start to see it pay off. You really start to hear things that you've never heard before. And number 4 would be anything that relates specifically to your instrument. So brass player, instrument-specific things are much different than woodwind players, are much different than a drummer, are much different than a piano player. You get the idea. There's certain things that you need to work on that relate specifically to the instrument that you've chosen to express yourself on that are very specific to your daily routine. So for instance, a brass player, they really need to work on their chops, right? Or they might need to work on expanding their range. A saxophone player may have to deal with reed issues and making sure that their reeds are in good shape so that they can get the best sound possible. A piano player has to worry about completely different physical things than any of the other instruments that I've already mentioned. So make sure that you're taking care of those instrument-specific goals. So these are things that everybody needs to work on as it relates to their specific instrument, all right? This is outside of our time spent on, jazz-specific stuff, things that are going to rotate in and out. What I'm practicing this month may not be what I'm practicing next month, definitely won't be what I'm practicing next year, but the 4 things that I've just mentioned should be a mainstay in your practicing throughout the years. So let's jump into the more jazz-specific stuff. So basically, like I said, what I would work on in the past would be working on maybe 5 to 10 different concepts every day. And what I'm starting to realize is that's too much. It's kind of like, turning on the fire hose and trying to get a sip of water from it. Not really going to work. What you need is just a trickle of information that you can really master. And I think that's the difference between an amateur jazz musician and a professional jazz musician, is that they understand this concept. So my advice here is to come up with 2 to 3 core exercises that you're going to work on until you master them. So we aren't just touching on them. We aren't spending 5-10 minutes on each one of these. I'm talking about spending hours on these specific concepts. And then, of course, you're going to move on to new, different things once you've mastered something. But I'm talking about not moving on to anything new until you feel like you really have it, you can pull it off, you've done it on stage, and it's really clear that whatever concept you're working on is a part of you and your playing before you move on. So I want to talk about my current regimen, and maybe it'll give you a few ideas on what you're going to be working on. Now, this could be completely different from what you're working on, and I'm not trying to point you in the direction of what I'm working on. This is simply meant to be an example of what I'm focusing on every single day. So right now in my practice routine, I'm working on 3 things. I'm working on my bebop vocabulary / chromatic approach tones and encasements and things like that. And I'm folding all of that stuff into learning tunes. So what I mean by that is learning tunes is not a separate part of my practice routine. I'm taking the concepts of my bebop vocabulary and my chromatic stuff, and I'm practicing it over the tunes that I would like to learn. And I find that folding these together really helps. When I work on learning tunes as a separate entity, I find myself far less focused than when I'm actually trying to accomplish a specific goal over the tunes that I'm learning. So that would be number 1. Number 2 is transcription. And actually, this can kind of fit into both categories because I'm never not going to be transcribing something. That's an ongoing thing that I do year after year, but it is directly related to jazz in the way that I'm transcribing jazz solos. So that's a really, really important part of my practice routine as well. Now, number 3 is something that I'm currently doing. I've been working on for the past few months, and it's really been paying off for me. I'm trying to memorize the Charlie Parker Omnibook, solo by solo, tune by tune. I'm trying to go through and memorize everything so that I'm really internalizing what the father of the bebop language has kind of laid out there for us. So those are an example of 3 things that I'm currently working on every single day. And like I said, I'm not just spending 5 to 10 minutes on all this stuff. I'm spending an hour or more on each one of these concepts. And I'm really, really trying to kind of beat myself over the head with these 3 things so that they get deep enough into my playing that I really feel like when I get on the bandstand at night, the stuff that I'm working on is really, really coming out in my playing. So what I might do is work on my bebop vocabulary after I warm up, all right? And I might do that for an hour. Then I might come back and redo my warm-up. Again, I'm really trying to just nail this stuff into my head. So I might come back, play my warm-up again, do those same concepts for the second time in a day. Then I might come back and do transcription after that. Then I'm going to make sure that I revisit my bebop vocabulary so that I'm not just seeing it one time per day. I'm seeing it at least twice, maybe 3 times per day. Then I might take a break, then come back and play my warm-up one more time just to get that stuff again and again and again. And then I might move into my Omnibook work. Okay, and I might do that for another hour. So you can see that I'm spending larger chunks of time on less things rather than just scratching the surface on a million different things. I'm trying to narrow my focus, and I've really found that it's really improved my playing in ways that I can't even explain to you. It's really something that's been very, very important to me over the past couple of months. Now, before we wrap up the episode, I want to mention a couple of things to avoid when it comes to practicing. The first thing is that, learning jazz and being a jazz musician can be extremely overwhelming. So you kind of have to put blinders on and focus on what's in front of you at the time. Now, obviously, a private teacher can really, really help with this because they will steer you in the right direction, a quality private teacher. But don't try to drink from that fire hose. There's always going to be something new for you to learn, but you need to go step by step and realize that this is a lifelong process and not something that's going to happen overnight. Number 2 is I want you to avoid what's called shiny object syndrome. And what that is that we always feel like there's something new and better to be working on than what we're currently working on. This is a real problem for jazz musicians, especially in this day and age where we just have unlimited access to information and there's people kind of shoving their ideas down our throat at every turn. Make sure that you're not always, this is going to be better to work on than what I'm currently working on. I can almost guarantee you that what you're currently working on is the best thing to be working on. So don't get distracted by all those shiny objects out there and drop something halfway through before you've actually gotten any of the benefit out of it. And number 3 goes back to basically the entire point of this episode is that scratching the surface never works. Commit yourself to detailed, intense study of a few things rather than a superficial study of a million things, right? And this is like the single best piece of advice that I can give you on how to be a better musician and really how to be better at everything in life. Really get deep into it. Don't scratch the surface, and then when it starts to get hard, jump onto something else. Power through that really, really difficult part of it and come out on the other side as a better musician. All right, I hope that was helpful for you guys. I know we didn't get into any one specific concept for this week, but I do think this is really important, and I feel really passionate about how much it has helped my playing over the past couple of months. So I really wanted to give you guys this episode, and hopefully it helps a lot of you out there. All right, we will talk to you guys next week. Next week is going to be our lick of the month, and we're going to get, again, into a really sort of specific thing rather than this more meta episode like is this week. All right, have a great week. Please go on to iTunes, check out the store, go on to the website, all that good stuff, and we'll talk to you all y'all next week. Have a good one.